Dot, 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 dot. Good morning, everybody. This is Grant from State of the Spark. How are you lovely people doing this morning? Marissa said I might be having trouble with my mic, so if I am, do let me know. I want to make sure that we can talk together uninterrupted. This morning, we got a good show. We're going to cover the 3 key drivers to respect and why is this a Spark value. And of course, we're going to talk about other news, how quadrant and tetraplegics can actually begin communicating with robotics, and how old is hoarding itself. We're going to cover that in other news. But before anything, you know we're going to cover cup of gratitude. I unfortunately don't have a cup for my cup of gratitude. I have water this morning. Man, I drink a lot of coffee. So we're going to start with water this morning. So go ahead and tell me in the comments, what are you grateful for today? What's driving you? What's keeping you pumped? What was your highlight this week? You might have had the worst week of your life, but there's always a highlight that you can be grateful for. I'd love to know what you're grateful for this morning. Put it in the comments and let's talk about what we're grateful for. I'm so grateful for vitamin C. This is silly. This is absolutely silly, but I'm grateful for it. I'm really happy and grateful and full of joy. Whenever I'm feeling even slightly under the weather, I start loading up on vitamin C like you can't believe. Yesterday I think I took 12,000 milligrams of vitamin C, and today I'm already feeling right as rain. So I am absolutely grateful that I have access. I live in a country and in a world where I have access to simple things like that I can get ahead of any ailments that bother me. That's what I'm grateful for this morning. I'm grateful for a clear docket today. We've got so much to do, and I've got a clear runway to do it, so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the little projects we've got going on. I'm grateful for the mortgage firm and my mortgage guy, Charles, who's just been absolutely phenomenal. I could keep going, but why am I keep going? Because I didn't hear from you. What are you grateful for this morning? Come on now. When you jump on here anytime today, whenever you're watching this thing, if you're watching the replay, let me know what you're grateful for. So that, my friends, is a swig of gratitude on this lovely Friday morning. Let's talk about other news. Here we go. So in other news, researchers demonstrate the first human use of high bandwidth wireless brain-computer interface. Now, this is actually really huge. So currently, there are interfaces where quadriplegics and tetraplegics, for those who don't know, are people that are completely paralyzed and maybe locked in to their body where their brain is functioning, but they can't even move their head or their face. Tetraplegics. Quadriplegics are often from the neck down, who can communicate their needs. But tetraplegics are locked in worse ways than others. Tetraplegics now have an even better way to communicate to the world. A small transmitter, about 2 inches at its widest, and weighs only about 1.5 ounces, and is mounted on the top of their head, is allowing them to exhibit motor control. So what we're saying is currently tetraplegics and a very expensive, very complex system can actually connect their brain through a series of wires that goes into a machine. And while they're laying in bed, that machine has a huge interface. But now we're able to do this wirelessly with a small device, getting even closer to Elon Musk's vision of Neuralink. And the idea here is this brain interface is actually linked to the motor cortex. That means that a tetraplegic laying in bed, though they cannot communicate, they have a pathway now for technologists and inventors to continue to use wireless technology to write programs for Google Hub and Google Home, to write programs for robotic arms and appendages so that they, laying in bed, could grab food for themselves. They could even have a keyboard type for them because the motor cortex actually could drive a robotic hand. So it allows the pathway for a lot of more freedoms and a lot more quality of life for those who might be locked into their own body through some spinal injury. So it's a very interesting piece of invention and innovation. Here you go. Boom. There's that one right there. If you're interested in how some of this is allowing for engineers to help people, help take quadriplegic and tetraplegics out of their body, out of their mind, and into the actual interfacing with the actual world. So it's really hopeful, and it really touched me to see that invention. So that is your first piece of other news. You know, sometime I should do an evening version of other news. And every time I sing a phrase, we all take a shot. It would be a mess, man. We're not going to do that. So in our next piece of other news, who actually invented complex culture? Let's talk about it. So for those who don't really know, we look forward so much. We look into technology, we look into space, and I am the worst offender of this. I always look forward. I'm always looking into the future. But that's not to neglect the past. In fact, it's becoming old hat and kind of boring to look back into the past and look back into archaeology. And so as we're looking at this now, nearly 105 years ago, in the Kalahari Desert, another group invented complex culture for themselves. Now, traditionally, it is believed that coastal people are the ones who actually invented complex culture. So what is complex culture? It's signs that have of culture that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with immediate survival. It was the transition, if you will, from nomads and rudimentary farmers to complex farming. For example, signs of this are collecting. To collect stones, rocks, gems, small animal skulls, to collect them for no religious purpose. I wrote in the article when hoarding was invented. Hoarders, design and decorating and use of pigments. So if someone actually came up, they actually found a red ochre blot that looked like it had been rubbed on the post of one of these dwellings. Storing water in containers. Now, you and I think, oh my gosh, I got water storage. What are you talking about? Like everyone's always known how to store water. No, as they were transitioning from the nomadic phase, part of their search as nomads was to find flowing water. And it wasn't until much later that they actually began storing water in animal skins, in ostrich egg shells, in stoneware. So it wasn't until much later that they began storing things. And this is super critical for complex culture. Because as we began to store things, say, for example, storing grapes, it allowed us to be able to experiment with things. For example, fermenting grapes and making wine. If you can store these things and don't have to eat them right off the vine, you can actually start to run innovations and experiments. If you can begin collecting pigments and chemicals and minerals, you can actually begin to innovate and to experiment. So it was a very critical time. Now, most of archaeology has purported that this began in most coastal cultures. But in the most recent research in the Kalahari Desert, they found that interior cultures were also inventing complex culture of their own, even a little earlier. So it's believed that about 105,000 years ago, this was happening. Now, what I love is the farther back in time we go with archaeology and research, the more advanced we realized we have been. And I am super curious if we'll find actual advanced species. And I encourage you to look up batteries in Egypt, because they actually found in stone containers in the pyramids, they had been able to conjure electricity through the use of sodium and sulfite and copper lining. So they actually found metallurgy and how to wield metal. They actually found that with chemical reaction that can create a charge. And they actually found that in putting the two sides of that charge together, they could come up with batteries. So if we've had batteries since Egyptian ruling about 6,000 years ago, 3 to 6,000 years ago, what else will we find out there? So if you're curious about complex culture and our archaeology, here you go. There's your link. By all means, check it out, because I believe we're a dynamic species. I believe we're phenomenal. And even though we might have been highly disconnected and highly individualized in eras like that, I believe we've evolved to the very complex single species that we are today. And it's always interesting to see our roots. So that, my friends, is a dot of Friday Other News. Let's talk about respect. You can't say the word respect anymore without singing R-E-S-P-E-C-T. I'm telling you, because respect is falling to the wayside, I believe, in our culture. The idea of respect even feels to me, when I say it, that it might smack of maybe not toxic masculinity, but masculinity of a bygone era. Because it's often men that often talk about or forcefully communicate this idea of respect. But we know that respect isn't limited to any particular group, and we know that we are all seeking to be respected by our peers, respected by those around us. And I want to dust off this word, if you will, because according to Spark Citizens, this is an immediate Spark Citizen value of respect. Respecting others, respecting our world, respecting the wealth that's come to us, respecting the challenges in front of us, respecting things. Now, we've talked about the Spark Citizen value of freedom. We talked about that a few days ago. You can go back and watch that. And how that is the absolute central hot white core of nearly all other Spark values and freedom frameworks. And then yesterday we talked about team and how we can operate as a team and how we should operate as a team. Today I'm going to touch on respect, because respect, as you can tell, as it pertains to team, you can't have team without respect. And you can't be exhibiting respect without participating as a team. They're almost co-equal on the priority scale of how we respect. We also can't exhibit other values like openness and understanding. We also can't care about our brand promises. I'm pointing at our poster over here. I wish I could just click and show you the poster. Our brand promises are to educate, encourage, and empower. You can't educate, encourage, and empower people you don't respect. I mean, you could try, but the subconscious signals of whether or not you like and respect these people would prevent an effective communication. You have to start with the respect inside of yourself, because remember, freedom started internally first, and only then did it manifest externally. And then the next quick leap is team and respect. So when you build a team to affect the world, you've got to respect your team, and you've got to respect the world. So respect to us is a core building block of what it means to be a Spark Citizen in the world. And I want to touch briefly, very briefly, on the 3 key drivers of respect and a freedom framework. We've been building like these games where you have like the 4 elements, you combine elements, like you combine water and heat and it makes steam, and then you can add steam to water and it does this, we build on the Spark Citizen core values because we're building into the freedom frameworks. So we're actually going to share our first freedom framework. I've shared with you the values: freedom, team, and respect are quick seconds at the second tier. And all of these together create the first freedom framework, which I'll share with you at the end. And it's how to respect people. It's a quick freedom framework, but let's touch on the 3 drivers of respect as I see it. And I'll present it for your consideration. And it comes from an abundant, and yes, I am trying to add an elevated definition to the word respect. So first off, respect is driven by curiosity. To satisfy curiosity, we actually have to be respectful of the object of our curiosity. What I mean by that is this: if I am curious about a culture 100,000 years ago, I have to genuinely curious. I have to first respect it. The inverse opposite of this is when I was heavily involved in church and they taught a short universe. They taught that the universe was only 6,000 years old. And if you presented any theories that were outside of that realm, there was a rejection of that idea. I would say there was a disrespect of any idea that taught for a long universe. Now, I respect knowledge, I respect science, I respect research, and I respect belief. So I had to entertain both, and it felt schizophrenic at times. But what you can't do when you reject an idea, one thing you don't have access to is curiosity about it. This is why debates look so silly these days. I don't know if you recall, but in the early 2000s, we would have these debates, and they started becoming very soft. They started becoming very odd, where we didn't have the debaters talking to one another, because it started out that they had no respect for one another. And because they had no respect, it started to turn into a small little battle on stage. And then we have since, I don't know if you saw the most recent debates, but they had the candidates on the stage and they asked them their favorite pastimes. Nothing that could possibly create tension or arguments There's no respect for one another, and they had to put them next to one another. So they actually made it just so that they wouldn't conflict. Instead of the early debates that actually sought first to understand before being understood, the 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek first to understand and only then be understood. And if you can exhibit this principle that Stephen Covey covered, that Spark Citizens value, if you can actually seek first to understand, you are exhibiting that, you know, I respect you. I might disagree with you, but I can respect you. And I can disagree with you with respect and cultivate curiosity. Well, where did you come up with that idea? What is that thought or philosophy or belief based on? Interesting. And I realized very quickly in the church that more than me wanting to have it right religiously or have it right scientifically, I wanted to be right with my fellow man. And exhibiting curiosity can sometimes infuriate extremists on either end because you actually don't posit a position. You just focus on respecting them and developing curiosity. Lack of respect closes the doorway to your heart in you and in others, and it prevents you from learning. It prevents you from learning. We're about to hit on one of the last Spark core values is growth, and we'll touch on that soon. But if you are not natively respecting people, you are not natively curious. And if you're not curious, you can't grow. And so I summarize this first driver of respect, and that is this curiosity respectfully questions. Hey, where did you come up with that idea? That's interesting. Use that phrase quite often. That's interesting. Instead of just disagreeing with people, use the phrase, that's interesting. It will extend the conversation much longer than it would have if you simply disagreed. So the first key driver of respect is curiosity. It drives respect, and respect drives it, and it opens up the world to you if you can be natively curious. Like, where did that come from? And it might even sound like you're belligerently questioning someone's sources. I'm not belligerently, I'm respectfully questioning because I'm natively curious. What happened to curiosity when you were a kid and you're like, how does this work? Oh, the lid goes like that. How do these things work? That doesn't stop just because you know how to do your job and you know how to pay bills. Be natively curious on how things work, and that will cultivate respect. The second key driver of respect, here we go, awe. A-W-E, awe. Spark citizens are in awe of the world around them. They're in awe of how someone can hold a belief of a short universe, or someone can hold a belief about gun rights, or someone can hold a belief about universal basic income. We're in awe. And this is a quick cousin of curiosity. Curiosity comes from and stems and interfaces with respect, as does awe. You can't be in awe of the world around you if you don't have a core value of respect. And this is why the word respect seems so alien. Like, man, we don't use this word much. We do when we're in a fight. I want you to respect me. We do in the back of our head. I don't feel respected. Or when we're talking to our friends about work, I don't feel respected. But we don't use this word often as a core value. In fact, the word itself, the etymology, pairs with the etymology for phrases like inspect, inspection, suspect, to look into a thing, and to look into it again. To respect is to look into it again, to look into it further. If you don't respect something, you won't look into it further. And awe, we already touched on curiosity. Awe draws you to things. If curiosity makes you inspect or respectfully question the things you encounter, awe draws you to go discover things to encounter. Awe is deeply rooted in the people that we are. We want to feel awe. When we think of living an ignited life of explosive significance, when we think going through life and just pumped, I feel great about things, we want to feel in awe. Marissa's chase, if you will, for Spark Explorer is to find things that are more awe-inspiring. Part of the reason we pursue business is it's awe-inspiring to be able to create enough value and serve enough people in an abundant-minded way that you can hit higher heights as it pertains to your business. The reason we love nonprofits and cause-driven organizations is it's hard to do. And it's awe-inspiring to watch someone do something that should probably be a nonprofit and try to make it live in the world in a sustainable way. It's a challenge. It's awe-inspiring. And as such, we can respect it. We are addicted to the good feelings that we call awe. When you and I envision our future self on the other side of most of our goals, on the other side of losing weight, on the other side, like when I picture hitting 178 pounds and hiking again and doing a lot of those things when I have time to do a lot of those things again, part of what I experience in that envisioning session is sitting on a mountain and overlooking and feeling full of awe, feeling full of gratitude, feeling all the serotonin and dopamine drops of beauty, but also feeling awe at what we are capable of. You know, this place of awe is an interesting doorway. When you feel awe, there's a doorway where you feel a thrill of, I cannot believe what we are capable of. And that doorway is a doorway inviting you to step over into what's next for what you're capable of. Awe is a driver of respect. You cannot feel awe if you don't go through life with respect. Now, I've touched on, and my examples have been highly charged politically, but it doesn't have to be. It could be the mundane. Are you curious about the neighborhood you live in and your neighbors? Are you in awe of how they live their lives? Are you natively curious? Are you in awe of how they manage their yard? Are you in awe of the work they do? Are you in awe of, man, I am just in awe of the type of people these people can be, even if it's not what you like, even if it's not what you agree with. It has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with a childlike mind. To respect the world is to be curious about the world. To respect our biome and our environment is to be in awe of it. Two key drivers, curiosity and awe. And last but not least, a third key driver of respect. And this one's going to be your own desire to be respected. You know, so much of our individual self, they say that the greatest fear of the individual self is driven by not fear of death, but fear of ostracization, to be ostracized, a fear of being thrust out and rejected by your own species, by your own family, by your own community. And in the Greeks, this was the worst thing. They would rather choose death than to be ostracized or thrust out of the community. To be ostracized. And a lot of people believe, a lot of anthropologists believe this came from that the idea that we were a nomadic, pack-driven animal, that our survival was based on dependence of the hunters and the gatherers around us. And then after that, the farming community we are part of is one specialized in tomatoes and the other specialized in gathering water. You know, this idea that you're part of a community. And then there was the luxury, very briefly, during the industrial era, the luxury of staunch individualism. But that era was briefly lived, very briefly. And we are now, because of our connectedness, moving back into an era of hyper interconnectedness. And the desire, the third driver of respect, our desire to be respected, is more relevant than ever before. Think of the Instagram generation and everyone trying to me too and outperform everyone else. They're really just trying to say, hey, please respect me. Please let me know that I'm a part of this species. Please give me the feedback loop that I'm going to survive, but also thrive. This species drives itself crazy, from the pursuit of abs to the pursuit of an Instagram-worthy hike in the woods, to the pursuit of building a business that everyone will respect. We're nearly all driven by our own unique vision of what it means to be respected. Is it ego? We could slip into Buddhism in another day. Partly. It's partly ego. It's partly the desire to express one's individualism. But if you shake it out, the desire to be respected and to live in a respectful way is more of a two-way street. And it can be an elevated, abundant-minded experience where it's not so ego-driven. But it's a fluid two-way street of respect, obviously rooted in the golden rule. The only way to be fulfilled with respect is to give it. And I don't mean paying subservience or homage. I mean desiring to be respected. I desire to be respected, but I don't want to be respected for oppressing people. Some people do respect the oppression that we've seen in the last presidency and the oppression we've seen of Gordon Geckos of Wall Street and those sorts of characters. But we want to be respected truly for our curiosity and our awe and the respect we feed into the world. And we want an abundant way to interact. So very quickly, I won't go into this. There's a whole freedom framework. And for the sake of time, you guys got to get about your life. I'll just cover very briefly 3 ways we can respect others. And it's a freedom framework. And I covered it yesterday, believe it or not. Time, energy, and money. Every project, every initiative, every city, every community, everything you are attempting to do is a pie. And that pie requires a finite amount of inputs. And that finite amount of it, and it might be a lot. It might be a lot of finite inputs, or it might be just a little. But it takes time, energy, and money. And you could correlate that to time, labor, effort, and or money. And these TEM, if you don't need any money, you need more time and energy. If you don't need any labor, you just need a little bit of time and a little bit of money, right? So every project, and we could break it down. Hey, what's the time, energy, money of that effort? If you are struggling in a project, we need to break that project down. And one of the very first frameworks we ask is, what's the time, energy, and money investment to get this thing done? And we take that inventory, and yes, it gets more detailed and nuanced from there, but it has to start at that high level. If you don't know the time, energy, money of the project you're on, it's probably a good reason on why it's been stalled out. This is the first freedom framework. Again, just like these video games where you combine elements and create new elements and create new complex things, we've touched on freedom as the core spark freedom, spark value. We've touched on team and now respect. They're a quick second. And the third one we're going to touch on is growth. We're going to cover that. And then we've covered our first official spark freedom framework, time, energy, money. Now I'll break down that spark freedom framework when we have more time in another context, because it does have some details on how to respect people's time, how to respect people's energy, how to respect people's money, and you will get further along in the world. So we're going to cover that very soon. I hope this has been useful, or at the very least, interesting to you on how Spark citizens value respect and the 3 key drivers of that respect. I hope you have a phenomenal day. I hope you bless other people's lives. I hope you absolutely take the next level today. But more than anything, I hope today that you ignite your own life of explosive significance. Have a great day.